You just cost us the target. The voice snapped through Ava Johnson's earpiece as the wind roared past her at 105 miles per hour on I-85. Her black superbike slicing through late afternoon traffic, the skyline of Charlotte shimmering ahead in the heat. Her gloved fingers steady on the throttle, her posture low and controlled, eyes locked on a matte black SUV weaving 2 lanes ahead. Its tinted windows hiding a man she had been tracking for 48 hours straight, a man who couldn't disappear tonight. Not again. Stay with him. The voice continued, calm but tight. Backup is 10 minutes out. Ava didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her focus was absolute. Every movement calculated, every shift of her weight precise. The hum of the engine beneath her wasn't just speed. It was timing. It was pursuit. It was the thin line between success and failure. Then the flash hit. Red and blue lights bursting behind her like a sudden storm, reflecting hard across her mirrors, growing. Fast, too fast, a police cruiser cutting through traffic with urgency that didn't match the situation. Ava's jaw tightened beneath her helmet. Not now. Not here. The SUV ahead signaled late and took an exit ramp, disappearing down a slope lined with concrete barriers. Her pulse kicked. She leaned slightly to follow, but the cruiser swung wide and blocked her path, tires gripping the asphalt with a sharp correction, forcing her to the shoulder. Engines around them rushing by in a blur of sound and motion, the moment collapsing in on itself. Pull over. Now. The officer's voice cut through the noise, firm, commanding, unquestioning. Ava slowed, controlled, deliberate, bringing the bike to a stop as the engine idled beneath her, heat rising around her legs, the smell of asphalt and exhaust thick in the air. She didn't look back right away, her eyes still searching the distance where the SUV had vanished, gone behind the curve, gone from sight, gone from reach. Her breath steadied, not panic, not anger, just calculation. The officer approached fast, boots hitting pavement with purpose, his presence filling the space beside her. Off the bike, he ordered, already certain, already decided. Ava lifted her hand slowly, removing one glove with care, her voice calm, controlled. Officer, you're interfering with a federal operation. The words landed flat against the rush of traffic. The officer paused for half a second, just enough to register, then dismissed it with a short exhale, the kind that came from habit, from assumption, from years of believing he could read a situation in seconds. Step off, he repeated. Sharper now. Ava swung her leg over the bike, boots touching the ground. Posture steady, no sudden moves, no resistance. But her eyes flicked once more toward the empty stretch of road where the SUV had disappeared, the silence inside her earpiece louder than any siren. And in that silence, she knew exactly what had just slipped away. The handcuffs clicked into place with a cold, final sound that seemed louder than the traffic rushing past at 70 miles per hour, and Ava Johnson felt the weight of the moment settle not on her wrists, but on the empty stretch of highway ahead where the target had vanished, her helmet still on, visor reflecting the flashing red and blue lights that painted everything in restless motion. Officer Daniel Hayes guided her a step closer to the patrol car, his grip firm but controlled, his focus fixed on procedure rather than possibility. License and registration, he said, voice steady, already reaching conclusions he had not spoken out loud. Ava kept her tone even, her breathing measured. My identification is in my inside pocket, left side. I am going to reach for it slowly. She moved with precision, no sudden motion, no challenge, just clarity. But inside her mind the timeline was recalculating, seconds turning into consequences, minutes into lost ground. The SUV had taken exit. 42. She had seen the last 2 digits before it disappeared. She replayed it once, twice, locking it in, the route options branching in her head like a map she had memorized long before today. Hayes took the card from her hand, glanced at it briefly, then back at her, his eyes narrowing slightly, not in recognition, but in doubt. The name meant nothing to him in this moment. Just another driver, just another stop. Step over here, he directed, guiding her toward the shoulder, gravel crunching beneath her boots, the air thick with heat rising from the pavement. Ava's earpiece remained silent. No updates, no instructions, just the faint static of a line that had gone quiet at the worst possible time. She tilted her head slightly as if listening, hoping for a voice, any voice, but none came. You were clocked well over the limit. Hayes continued, writing something down, his pen moving quickly across the pad, the kind of motion that came from repetition, from confidence in a system that rarely questioned itself. Ava watched him for a moment, not with defiance, but with a quiet assessment, measuring the space between what he saw and what he did not. "Officer, I need you to understand," she said, her voice calm but carrying a sharper edge now, not emotional, just precise. "There is an active investigation in progress, and you are putting it at risk." Hayes exhaled through his nose, a short breath that carried impatience more than anger. "If that were true," he replied, not looking up from his notes, "you would have led with that in a way that made sense." He tore the slip cleanly, the paper sound crisp against the noise of the highway. Ava did not respond immediately. Instead, she looked past him, beyond the patrol car, beyond the flashing lights, toward the road that now looked completely ordinary, as if nothing had just changed, as if a critical moment had not slipped through it unnoticed. Her fingers flexed once against the metal around her wrists, not to resist, but to feel, to ground herself in the present. She knew better than to escalate, better than to force a situation that required precision, not reaction. Hayes finally met her gaze, expecting frustration, expecting argument, but what he found instead was something quieter, something steadier, a stillness that did not match the situation. And for the first time, a small uncertainty flickered across his expression, subtle, almost invisible, but real. Ava spoke again, softer now. "You still have time to fix this." The words hung between them, not a threat, not a plea, just a statement, and in the distance, far behind the curve of the highway, a low rumble began to build, faint at first, then growing, the sound of multiple engines moving fast, too fast for ordinary traffic, closing the distance with a purpose that neither of them had yet fully understood. The low rumble grew louder, no longer blending into the background of passing traffic, but cutting through it with intention. 3 black SUVs cresting the curve behind them at high speed, their movements tight, coordinated, unmistakably purposeful. Ava Johnson did not turn her head immediately. She did not need to. The pattern was already clear in the rhythm of the engines, in the spacing between vehicles, in the way they held formation even as they approached the shoulder. Officer Daniel Hayes noticed it a second later, his pen pausing mid-motion, his posture shifting as instinct pulled his attention toward the incoming convoy. The flashing lights of his cruiser reflected across their windshields as they closed the distance, slowing only at the last possible moment before aligning behind the patrol car, with precise control, engines idling with a quiet power that carried authority without needing to announce it. Doors opened almost in unison, not rushed, not aggressive, just deliberate, controlled, and exact. Hayes straightened slightly, confusion flickering across his face as he watched 2 men step forward, both dressed in plain dark jackets, their movements calm but direct, one of them already reaching into his pocket. Ava remained still, her hands resting where they had been placed, her shoulders relaxed despite the tension in the air, her visor reflecting the shifting scene around her. The man in front approached Hayes first, holding up a badge with a steady hand. "Federal Bureau of Investigation," he said clearly, his voice carrying over the hum of engines and the distant rush of traffic. Hayes blinked once, processing, his gaze dropping to the badge, then back to the man's face, searching for context that had not existed a moment ago. "We need you to remove the restraints," the agent continued, his tone not raised, not forceful, but leaving no room for delay. Hayes hesitated. Just for a fraction of a second, the kind of hesitation that came when certainty cracked and something unfamiliar took its place. His eyes shifted toward Ava, really looking at her now, not as a speeding driver, not as a routine stop, but as a variable he had not accounted for. Ava met his gaze through the tinted visor, calm, steady, unchanged, the silence between them stretching just long enough to be felt. Then Hayes moved, reaching for the keys at his belt, the metal clicking softly as he unlocked the cuffs, the pressure around Ava's wrists. Releasing, she lowered her hands slowly, flexing her fingers once as circulation returned, not dramatic, not rushed, just measured. The agent stepped closer to her, lowering his voice slightly. "We lost visual on the target after exit 42. he said. Ava nodded once, already turning her attention back to the road, her mind picking up where it had been forced to pause, reconstructing the path, recalculating the distance. He will take surface streets to avoid cameras, she replied, her voice even. Focused, as if the interruption had not shaken her at all. Hayes stood a step back now, the citation still in his hand, forgotten, his earlier confidence replaced by a quiet realization that settled in slowly, not loud, not dramatic, but undeniable. Ava reached for her helmet strap, securing it with a practiced motion, her movements efficient, purposeful. She stepped back toward her bike, the engine still warm beneath her, ready, waiting. She swung her leg over and settled into position, glancing once more down the empty stretch of road ahead, the place where everything had shifted. Then the agent looked at Hayes, his expression neutral but firm. Next time, he said, ask one more question before you decide. Hayes did not respond immediately, his eyes still on Ava as the engine roared back to life, deeper now, sharper, cutting through the air with renewed urgency. And as she pulled away from the shoulder, accelerating back onto the highway, the space she left behind felt heavier than before, not because of what had happened, but because of what had almost been lost. Ava Johnson leaned forward as the bike surged back onto the highway, the engine rising into a sharp, controlled roar that cut through the afternoon air, her body aligned with the machine as if the interruption had never happened. But inside her mind the clock had not reset. It had accelerated, every second now heavier, every mile more critical. Agent Johnson, we have traffic cams picking up a black SUV heading eastbound on Route 16. The voice returned in her earpiece, steadier now but carrying the weight of urgency that had been missing before. Ava adjusted her speed, pushing past 90 miles per hour as the city blurred around her, the late sun casting long shadows across the asphalt, her eyes scanning every lane, every exit, every reflection in passing windows, the world narrowing down to motion and pattern. Confirm plate, she replied, her voice calm, precise, as if she had never been forced off the road minutes earlier. Partial match, last 3 digits 872. The voice answered. Ava's mind locked onto it instantly, replaying the image she had captured before the stop, aligning memory with data. The SUV had taken exit 42, but Route 16 intersected less than 2 miles ahead, which meant the target had not vanished, only shifted. She leaned slightly, weaving through traffic with controlled precision, never reckless, never uncertain, just fast enough to close the gap that had been forced open. The wind pressed hard against her chest, her gloves steady on the grips, her breathing even beneath the helmet, the rhythm of the engine syncing with her focus. Then she saw it. Not clearly at first, just a shape between vehicles, dark, low, moving with intent rather than flow. Her pulse tightened once, not with panic, but recognition, visual acquired. She said quietly, the words landing like a marker in time. The SUV ahead changed lanes abruptly, slipping between 2 cars, trying to blend, trying to disappear in plain sight. Ava adjusted without hesitation, keeping distance, not closing too fast, not drawing attention, just enough to track, just enough to stay present. The earlier silence in her earpiece now replaced with coordinated movement. Units are redirecting to your position. The voice informed her, but Ava knew the reality. They were still minutes out, and minutes had already been lost. She could not rely on timing that had already failed once. She had to hold the line alone. For now, the SUV signaled late again, taking a narrow exit ramp that dipped beneath an overpass, the kind of route chosen by someone who knew how to vanish without raising alarms. Ava followed at a controlled distance, reducing speed just enough to avoid attention. The environment shifting from open highway to tighter streets, buildings rising closer, shadows deeper, the sound of her engine echoing differently against concrete and glass. The SUV turned again, sharper this time, into a side street lined with parked cars and fading storefronts. Ava slowed further, her posture adjusting, her presence less visible now, more deliberate, the chase no longer about speed, but about patience, about reading intent rather than reacting to it. I am staying with him, she said, her voice steady. But beneath that steadiness was something sharper, something shaped by what had already happened. She would not lose him again, Not because of interruption, not because of assumption, not because someone had looked at her and decided she did not belong in that moment. Ahead, the SUV rolled to a near stop at a quiet intersection, its brake lights glowing red in the dimming light, and Ava eased off the throttle, holding back just enough. Watching, waiting, sensing that whatever came next would not follow the rules she had just fought to return to. The black SUV idled at the intersection longer than necessary, its brake lights glowing steadily in the fading light, and Ava Johnson felt the shift immediately, not in speed, not in movement, but in intention, the kind of pause that was not hesitation, but calculation. Her bike rolled forward just enough to keep visual contact without closing the gap, her engine lowered to a controlled hum, blending into the quiet rhythm of the street, the buildings around her casting long shadows that stretched across the pavement like silent barriers. Agent Johnson, units are 2 minutes out. The voice in her earpiece reported, but the timing no longer mattered the same way, because something in front of her was already changing. The SUV's turn signal blinked once, then stopped. No turn, no movement, just stillness. And then the driver's door opened slightly, not fully, just enough to suggest presence. Ava's grip tightened subtly on the handlebars, her eyes narrowing behind the visor. She did not move closer, did not accelerate. She held position, letting the distance become her advantage. The door closed again, slow, deliberate, as if whoever was inside had seen something they were not expecting, or someone, Ava's reflection, faintly visible in the side mirror of a parked car beside her. Black helmet, dark bike, a figure that did not belong in this quiet street, but refused to disappear. He knows, she said quietly. Not a question, just an observation shaped by experience. The line went silent for a fraction of a second before the response came. Hold position, do not engage. But Ava already understood the risk. Engagement was not always a choice. Sometimes it was the moment itself deciding what came next. The SUV rolled forward slowly, then turned right without signaling, slipping deeper into the narrow streets. Ava followed at a distance, her speed matching, her presence controlled. The air cooler now as the sun dipped lower, the sound of her engine echoing softly between brick walls and storefront glass, every turn tightening the space, every block reducing the margin for error. The SUV picked up speed suddenly, not fast, but faster than before. Enough to test whether it was being followed. Ava adjusted without hesitation, maintaining the gap, never too close, never too far, her mind mapping the grid ahead, anticipating exits, dead ends, open routes. The earlier interruption replayed once in her thoughts, not as frustration, but as a reminder. Time had already been taken from her. She could not afford to lose more. The SUV slowed again, this time pulling halfway toward the curb as if preparing to stop, but not committing. The indecision felt intentional, like a test, like a question being asked without words. Ava eased off the throttle, letting the bike coast, her posture relaxed but ready, her presence now a shadow rather than a signal. The street ahead opened slightly, a wider intersection, just beyond the next block, and for a brief moment everything aligned, distance, angle, timing, until a sudden movement broke the pattern. The SUV accelerated sharply, turning left across the intersection just as a delivery truck rolled through, blocking Ava's line of sight completely. The sound of her engine rose instinctively as she moved to follow, but by the time she cleared the truck, the street ahead was empty. No brake lights, no turn signal, no trace of the vehicle that had been there seconds ago. Just an open road and the echo of a decision she could not undo. Ava slowed to a stop at the edge of the intersection, her visor reflecting nothing but empty space, her breathing steady but heavier now, not from fear, not from doubt, but from the realization settling in, not loud, not dramatic, just precise. He had disappeared again, and this time, it was not just speed that had taken him away. Ava Johnson did not move for a moment, her bike idling beneath her as the empty intersection stretched out ahead like a question with no answer. The sound of the engine low and steady, almost drowned out by the distant hum of the city settling into evening. Her visor reflected the fading light, a mix of amber and shadow across the pavement. No SUV, no movement, just stillness. And in that stillness something shifted, not outside, but inside her, a quiet recalibration, She replayed the last 10 seconds again. The delivery truck, the timing of the turn, the angle of the street, the speed, the hesitation before acceleration. It was not random. It was planned, deliberate, the kind of move made by someone who knew how to vanish not by speed alone, but by structure, by understanding the rhythm of the environment. Agent Johnson, we lost all visual. The voice in her earpiece returned, softer now, less certain. Ava did not respond immediately, her eyes scanning the intersection again. Slower this time, not looking for what was obvious, but for what did not belong. The way the street curved slightly to the left, the narrow alley between two buildings halfway down the block, the reflection of a dark surface in a storefront window that did not match the cars parked along the curb. Her breathing steadied, deeper now, not rushed, not frustrated, just focused. She eased off the throttle completely, letting the bike roll forward a few feet, then stopped again, listening, not to the engine, not to the city, but to the absence of both, the kind of silence that only appeared when something had just moved through it. He did not disappear, she said quietly, more to herself than to the voice on the line. He changed layers. The words hung in the air, precise, intentional. Her head turned slightly toward the alley, the narrow space barely wide enough for a vehicle, shadowed, easy to miss at speed. She had seen that kind of move before, not in training, but in the field, where instinct mattered more than protocol, where hesitation cost more than mistakes. She shifted her weight and guided the bike slowly toward the opening, the tires rolling over uneven pavement as the light dimmed between the buildings, the temperature dropping just enough to be felt through her jacket. The alley stretched ahead, tighter than the street, the sound of her engine echoing softly against brick and metal. And then she saw it. Not fully, just the edge of it, the rear corner of a black SUV tucked behind a delivery van, hidden from the main road, positioned in a way that suggested patience, not escape. Ava's pulse tightened once, not from surprise, but from confirmation. Visual reacquired, she said, her voice calm but carrying a sharper edge now, the kind that came from understanding something others had missed. The line went quiet for a fraction of a second before the response came back, more alert now, confirm position. But Ava was already moving, not fast, not aggressive, just enough to close the distance without breaking the illusion of stillness. The SUV remained parked, engine likely still warm, waiting, watching, and for the first time since the stop on the highway, Ava allowed herself a single thought to settle, not about the delay, not about what had been lost, but about what still could be, because this time, she had not followed the path. She had read the pattern, and the pattern had led her here. Ava Johnson slowed the bike to a near-silent crawl, the engine barely above a whisper as she entered deeper into the alley, the space tightening around her with every foot forward, brick walls rising on both sides, the faint scent of oil and dust hanging in the cooler air, her eyes fixed on the black SUV partially concealed behind the delivery van. Its presence no longer a question but a confirmation. The vehicle had not run. It had waited, calculated, adapted, just like she had. Her gloved fingers relaxed slightly on the grips, not from ease, but from control. Every movement now intentional, measured. She stopped the bike at a distance that gave her visibility without exposure, the kind of distance that allowed observation without announcement, her visor reflecting the dim shapes ahead. The SUV remained still, no brake lights, no visible motion, just a quiet presence that felt anything but passive. Agent Johnson, units are 30 seconds out, the voice returned, sharper now, more aligned with the urgency she had been carrying alone. Moments before, Ava did not answer right away, her focus narrowing further. She watched the driver's side mirror, the slight angle of the front tires, the faint vibration along the edge of the vehicle that suggested the engine was still running, not off, not abandoned, ready, always ready. He is inside, she said finally, her voice low but certain, the words landing with the weight of direct confirmation. The silence that followed on the line was different this time, not uncertain, but alert. Synchronized, she shifted her posture slightly, adjusting her balance on the bike, not advancing, not retreating, just holding the moment exactly where it needed to be, the kind of stillness that came from experience, from knowing that rushing forward could undo everything that had been rebuilt after the loss on the main road. The alley seemed to hold its breath with her, the distant sounds of traffic reduced to a muted hum, the light fading just enough to soften the edges of everything in sight. And then it happened, subtle at first. The driver's side door of the SUV opened slowly, not wide, not abrupt, just enough to reveal movement inside. Ava's gaze sharpened, her posture unchanged. She did not reach for anything, did not call out, did not escalate. She simply watched. The figure inside shifted, stepping partially into view, not fully revealed, but enough to confirm presence, enough to confirm awareness, because the pause that followed was not hesitation, it was recognition, the kind that passed silently between two people who understood the situation without needing to speak. "He sees me," Ava said quietly, not as a reaction, but as a fact. The air between them felt charged, not with danger, but with consequence. Every decision now balanced on seconds, on timing, on control. The approaching sound of vehicles at the far end of the alley grew louder, engines slowing, doors preparing to open. The backup she had been waiting for finally arriving. But Ava did not look back. Her attention remained locked forward, because this moment, this exact second, belonged to her, not to the team, not to the system, but to the space between her and the man in that vehicle, the one who had tried to disappear twice and had failed both times. And for the first time since the stop on the highway, the control of the situation shifted, quietly, decisively, into her hands. The figure stepped fully out of the SUV, slow and deliberate, hands visible, posture controlled, not panicked, not rushed, but aware, fully aware, and Ava Johnson felt the shift in the air tighten into something precise, something final, the kind of moment where everything narrowed down to a single line between action and restraint. She remained seated on the bike, engine idling low, her silhouette steady against the dim light of the alley. The man glanced once toward the far end where the sound of approaching vehicles was now unmistakable, then back at her, measuring, calculating, deciding. "You tracked me twice," he said, his voice calm, almost conversational, carrying across the short distance without strain. Ava did not respond immediately, her gaze fixed, her posture unchanged, the stillness between them holding more weight than any movement could. "You had help," he continued, a faint tilt of his head suggesting the incoming agents. Ava finally spoke, her voice even, grounded. "I had interference." The words landed clean, without accusation, without emotion, just truth. The man's expression shifted slightly, not surprise, but recognition, the kind that came when a pattern aligned with expectation. "And you still found me," he said quietly, almost to himself. Ava did not nod, did not confirm. She simply held the moment. The space between them filled with the quiet understanding that neither of them had relied on chance. The approaching vehicles slowed at the mouth of the alley, doors opening, footsteps controlled but urgent, the team moving into position behind her. But Ava did not turn, did not acknowledge them, because the focus remained forward, always forward. The man exhaled once, a measured breath that carried more decision than hesitation. Then he stepped back slightly from the open door, not retreating, not advancing, just adjusting his position within the narrowing space. "You could have let it go," he said, his tone softer now, not defensive, not challenging, just stating what he believed was an option. Ava's reply came without delay, without change in tone. "That was never an option." The words settled between them, firm but quiet, the kind that did not need to be raised to be understood. The agents behind her moved closer now, their presence filling the edges of the scene, but still, no sudden moves, no escalation, just controlled positioning. The man glanced once more at the path behind him, then forward again, and something in his posture shifted. Not surrender, not defeat, but acceptance, the kind that came when every exit had already been calculated and none remained. Ava finally eased the bike slightly to the side, creating space, not blocking, not forcing, just allowing the moment to resolve without pressure. The man looked at her one last time, a brief, silent acknowledgement passing between them, not agreement, not alliance, but recognition of what had just unfolded. And then he stepped fully away from the vehicle, into the light. That was no longer fading but steady, as if the moment itself had decided to hold still long enough for everything to settle into place. And behind Ava, the quiet presence of the team closed the distance, not with urgency, but with certainty, the kind that came only after the outcome had already been decided. The alley settled into a quiet that felt heavier than before, not because of tension, but because everything that needed to happen had already happened. Ava Johnson remained on her bike for a moment longer, the engine now idling softer, almost fading into the background as the agents moved with controlled precision around the scene, their voices low, measured, no urgency left in their tone, only procedure, only certainty. The man stood where he had stepped into the light, his posture steady, no longer calculating exits, no longer scanning for gaps, just present, fully aware of the outcome he had tried to delay but could not avoid. Ava watched him for a second longer, not with judgment, not with triumph, but with the same calm focus that had carried her through every second of the pursuit. Then she turned her head slightly as one of the agents approached her. "We have him," he said, his voice carrying a quiet respect, not just for the result, but for the way it had been reached. Ava gave a small nod, nothing more, her hands moving to adjust her gloves with the same steady rhythm she had maintained from the beginning. No sudden release of tension, no visible shift, just continuity, as if the moment had simply folded into the next without disruption. Behind her, the sound of a patrol car engine approached slowly, different from the earlier urgency, more measured now, more cautious. Officer Daniel Hayes stepped out, his posture no longer rigid with certainty, but softened by something quieter, something reflective. He paused a few steps away, taking in the scene, the agents, the SUV, the position of everything, and finally, Ava, who sat on her bike as if she had always belonged exactly where she was. He walked closer, not interrupting, not asserting, just approaching with a deliberate calm. "Agent Johnson," he said, the words careful, precise, no longer based on assumption but on understanding. Ava turned slightly toward him, her visor still down, reflecting his figure in a muted, almost distant way. "Officer," she replied, her tone even, unchanged. Hayes hesitated. For a brief moment, the kind of pause that held more weight than any immediate response could. Then he spoke again. "I should have asked one more question." The words were simple, but they carried the shift, the realization, the quiet acknowledgement of everything that had unfolded between the highway and this alley. Ava held his gaze through the tinted visor for a second, then reached up and lifted it, the motion smooth, unhurried, revealing eyes that were not angry, not dismissive, just steady. "You still can," she said, her voice calm, not as correction, not as criticism, but as something closer to a reminder. Hayes nodded once, a small movement, but genuine, the kind that settled rather than performed, the space between them quiet again, but different now, not uncertain, not tense, just resolved. Ava lowered her visor back into place, the soft click final, but not abrupt. She shifted her weight slightly and turned the throttle, the engine responding instantly, alive again with purpose. She eased the bike forward, passing slowly through the narrow opening of the alley, the agents stepping aside without needing to be told, the path clearing naturally, as if the moment itself was making space for her to leave. The light at the end of the alley stretched wider as she moved toward it, the sound of the engine growing stronger, then softer as distance took it away, and when she reached the street beyond, she did not look back, not at the SUV, not at the agents, not at the officer who had stopped her, because everything that needed to be understood had already been left behind. And in the quiet that followed, the only thing that remained was the steady echo of a choice made differently. Just one question, just one moment, and how much it could change.